Hello, folks. I'm Jonny McFarlane, and this is the Rangers Review morning briefing. Today I'm joined by Chris Jack. Chris, welcome.
How are we, Jonny? How's things?
Good. Yes, a little bit late this morning. Typical for me, so apologies about that. Was running a tad late. I'm actually day off today, so I've got various irons in the fire that I was needing to attend to. Listen, there's loads to talk about, as there always is with Rangers. Never a dull day, even during international break, which is quite a surprise, because if you look at other clubs, international week can be something akin to tumbleweeds drifting past, but with Rangers it's never quite like that, and there's still plenty to chat about. Not least not least Chris. Really interesting.
That surely has to be a fine. You can't get away with that for a second in the morning.
You're both just as handsome as each other. But there's a really good piece on the Rangers Review today by Joshua Barry, who's obviously off, or he would be here to drill into the detail himself. And he's had a wee look at the data around this season so far and what it tells us about how Rangers are playing, particularly Cyril Dessers and his finishing, but also focusing a little bit on the midfield. So the midfield trio of Connor Barron, Diamandi in that sort of slightly more pushed forward position, and then Nico Raskin. How do you, Chris, assess that three-man midfield? And what's your reckoning for the future in terms of how likely that is to remain together?
I think on paper that looks like the best. I think that looks the best three right now. Certainly with Tom Lawrence also been injured. Josh actually touches on Lawrence in that piece on the site this morning, and I think he's perhaps been one of the, not quite a surprise package, but he has been one of the more influential attacking threats for Rangers. I know he's not exactly a firm favourite with a lot of the fans. I think there was a feeling over the summer that he could have potentially moved on, and it wouldn't have been a massive surprise or a huge loss. I think if he had moved on, having stayed at the club, he's played in a number of big games. Clearly, someone that the manager likes, and he does create chances. But more importantly, he does score goals. I think it's 5 that he's got already, 4 of them in the league, or 3 in the league off the top of my head. And he does offer a threat. That number 10 area, we spoke a lot about that over the course of the summer. Obviously, Todd Cantwell left the club, moved on, left Rangers with a hole to fill in there. Bayrami came in, and I think there was a lot of excitement amongst the fans about can Bayrami go and be that starting number 10, Tom Lawrence as your backup. For one reason or the other, that's not the way that a number of weeks unfolded. Obviously, have issues on the left-hand side. No Cortez, no Rabi Matondo. That has forced Bayrami to play from that side. That gave Tom Lawrence the chance to play at 10. Right now, with Lawrence not there, Diamandi has come in and been in that 10 role. Overall, not overly convinced with Diamandi this season. I don't think he's had a great start. I think you're right to be asking a bit more of a guy who came in. It was top when he came in with a good profile. Rangers invested a lot of money in him, or a relatively large amount of money in him for roughly where Rangers are in the transfer market. And I think they're just looking for a wee bit more. I'm not really sure what his best role in this team is yet. I think Josh's piece outlines that. You're just looking for a bit more, certainly in terms of an attacking influence when he plays as the 10. Could he drop back to play probably as the number 8? I think he could, but where does that then leave the partnership of Barron and Raskin, which has looked impressive? So ideally, I think you want Bayrami at 10. You want Diamandi in the team, but that then comes at a cost. Now, I dare say it's a nice problem to have, but once everyone is fit, once everyone's available, what is the actual ideal makeup of that midfield? And that's before we get to, could we go back into the transfer market in January and potentially strengthen that area of the pitch once again? So I think there's quite there's quite a lot of issues there for Clermont to solve. But unlike a lot of the ones that he's got to solve, this is actually a good one. He does have good players that I think the fans do like, and that there's definitely something in. It's just what is the right combination in there.
You mentioned Tom Lawrence, Chris. Obviously, he's out of contract at the end of the season. Do you look at him and think there's someone that Rangers should be talking to? Or is it a case of playing the waiting game and just seeing how he responds across the whole season? For me, Tom Lawrence has just not been fit enough. And I think while he offers that ability to unlock doors, given he's got that 30-yard dig on him that no one else really has in the team or in the squad, for me, he's a player that you use until the end of the season and then say, right, thanks for your service. We're going to move on somewhere else, because he's not on low wages either.
No, and I think the wages thing will come into it. You look at, it's interesting. The manager spoke a lot towards the end of last season. There's a number of the guys been out of contract, and he spoke about why Rangers cannot afford to be in this situation. Now, Lawrence is different to some of them because he's not a real sellable asset. He's not one that you look at player trading wise. There's going to be a huge profit, and so I think they could afford to play the waiting game on it. They could afford to wait and see what other offers he gets, see what he's willing to play for. If they can convince him to take a large enough cut, you can maybe keep him as a squad player. But I'm not convinced that going forward there's a long term Rangers future for him. It's just not quite worked out. I think he started really well, and you remember when he first came in, a couple of goals in his first a few weeks at the club. Also picked up that injury that then ruins so many months. Come back, it was a bit stop-start after that. As I mentioned earlier on, I think the manager does like him. He has put his trust in him in certain games, but for me, he's not a guy that you'd play in the biggest of games. Now, going to Pittodrie, would you start him? Certainly against Celtic, where that be at Parkhead, or in the game Ibrox coming up, if he's fit, would you start him there? Probably not. I don't think he offers enough. And at his profile, of his age, of his potential wage, do you look at all that and say, the Rangers could utilise that money and that squad space better? And I think they probably could. So I would be surprised if he's still a Rangers player this time next season.
Yeah, I agree with you. Let's have a look at the comments. James Skeen says that midfield three probably has more energy but not much goal threat. I think that's a very, very fair point. Neil Jameson says Diamandi isn't a number 10, better with Hadji. Again, it's coming back to those square pegs in round holes, or round holes in square pegs, whatever that analogy is, and Rangers using people in positions whereby they're maybe not naturally suited. You look at Hadji on the bench there, a Romanian international who was excellent at the Euros, who's been a high performer for Rangers in the past. I think in the season when the club won the title under Steven Gerrard, Hadji had something like 25 goal contributions. I mean, that's the kind of numbers that just we've not seen for a few years from a Rangers attacker. So while I'm not saying that Yanis Hadji is a world beater or is a guy who's going to change the course of the title race with Rangers 9 points behind, you do wonder if he would just be a better option there if you're going to play the system with a number 10. But that's one for the manager to answer, I think, really. And he's kind of made it quite clear that perhaps he sees other players as better fits in there so far. Douglas Anderson, interesting point. Lawrence, Dessers and Tav out the door in January, and bringing in replacements would be a great window. I don't think Lawrence is going anywhere. I think Dessers still has sellable value, but I can't see, given the amount he's been used, why Rangers would sell him on, although I think they absolutely should if they were able to. And James Tavernier, well, I mean, that's an interesting one. And I suppose we'll just have to see where that goes. Clearly, a decision was made in the summer that Tavernier wanted to remain, because there were offers. There was offers from Turkey. There was interest from other places. And quite what happened, I don't think anyone's really got to the bottom of yet, Chris, in terms of exactly what behind-the-scenes machinations were taking place. But certainly at one stage, there was talk of him leaving. There was an offer that was rejected. And then very, very, very swiftly, there was a Rangers TV interview that seemed to draw a line under the entire situation regarding Tavernier and potentially leaving. So let's see what happens come the summer. I don't think, come the winter window. I don't think Tavernier looks too happy personally. He's playing like he's unhappy, and he doesn't look body language wise like he's looked in previous years for me. So that's going to be an interesting one. But away from Tav and just on to Dessers, because that's another core part of Josh's article this morning. Chris, I've been very, very critical of Cyril Dessers. I know you've joined the party. Maybe you've been there from the start. I can't quite remember. But Josh is certainly starting to see my point of view and your point of view on this. And the data, I think, probably points to what a lot of Rangers fans are saying. Josh has gone into a bit of detail on this with regards to what his XG looks like. Now, XG is expected goals. It's a mathematical equation that works out how many and how good chances you've had and how many goals should have come from those chances. It's used across bookmaking by people who beat the bookies and across football now. It's very, very highly used as a stat. And interestingly, Dessers so far this season in the league, you won't be surprised to know, has underperformed his XG. He's got 4 goals, but he should have had 5.08 based on his chances. And in the Europa League, he's managed a goal, but he should have had 2.01 goals. So he's underperforming by 2 goals in those 2 competitions. Now, there's some context around that. Rangers are taking fewer shots per 90 than they have been previously. Josh thinks that's a byproduct of Clement's team attacking at a slightly lower pace. But then you look at Danilo, and it's quite interesting in terms of Danilo coming in. He's not had a lot of game time. It's a small sample size. But still, Danilo averaging 5.19 shots per 90. Cyril Dessers 3.81 so far this season. So quite interesting how much more Danilo is offering and how the statistics back all that up, Chris.
I think that you mentioned there the fans won't be surprised that Dessers is underperforming his expected goals. For me, the most alarming or one of the most surprising numbers in Josh's piece this morning was the 6 fewer shots per 90 in the league. And again, I think people who have had the pleasure or the misfortune of watching Rangers domestically this season, I think they'll not find that a huge surprise, because I think now, Josh, as you mentioned, it could be down to not attacking as quickly. I think it just almost comes down to a lack of creativity as well. It's not just the regularity at which Rangers attack; it's the quality at which they're attacking with. Touched on this point with Stevie on the talking point on the show that's out first thing this morning, and you look at Rangers penalty stats, the old penalty for Rangers cliche and jibe that we always get. Rangers are not being awarded as many penalties because they're not in the opposition box. They're not actually in the area to force defenders to make those challenges. And seasons gone by, you would find a lot of Rangers players in that area of the pitch were overloading to get players into the box. Teams then commit fouls. Rangers get their penalties. Tav gets his goals, and everyone is fairly happy. That's not happening because Rangers are just not getting into those areas often enough. There's a disconnect between Dessers as the main focal point of this side and the rest of the attack. I think to be fair to Clement, you could say he's still not got the ideal squad set up that he's looking for. He doesn't have the options wide left, for example, because 2 of his wingers, in Matondo and Cortez, have had injury issues once again. So that clearly affects how he's looking to play his football. But for me, it's more a style problem than a personnel problem. You look at Dessers, yes, he's got his faults. Still better than a number of strikers in the Scottish Premiership. You look at Barami and Cherny, they are proven international players, more than good enough to be in a Rangers side and far better than a number of players within the Scottish Premiership. If you have those options as your front three, plus you've got like Diomande in behind, Tom Lawrence in behind, there should be enough. There should be enough there for Rangers to ask more questions of teams. And I think that's that from Josh about taking six freer shots. That thing that almost feeds into the malaise almost from Rangers. They're not good to watch. They're not exciting. They're not taking the game to teams. They don't dominate games. They're not. They have won a number of these games by small margins, but they're not winning them by small margins when a goalkeeper pulls off 3, 4, 5 outstanding saves, or it's blocked on the line, or there's last gap challenges, and teams are defending for their lives. Teams are fairly comfortable against Rangers these days, certainly defensively, and Rangers they're nicking these games, they're edging these games, and eventually, yes, you can say it's a good habit to get into to be able to win tight games, but eventually that type of thing catches up on you, and if it does catch up on Rangers, going to find themselves in an even worse position than they already are.
Yeah, Chris, I can't shake the notion that actually what's being built here is quite a good European side, but a pretty poor Scottish Premiership side. Rangers go away and against a team that won the Conference League last year, look pretty comfortable, create good chances, and get a draw in Greece, a place that is just not easy to go. I remember going back to some very, very difficult games in the 90s and the early 2000s against Greek teams where the atmosphere was really rough and Rangers struggled to get results. But they went there and performed well. You saw against Malmo, the less said probably about the Lyon game, the better, but Rangers did have good chances in that game as well. I just think that Rangers have kind of been set up with the wrong idea in mind. They've been set up with that European mid-block. If a team comes at them, we come back swinging and we come back more incisive. And they're good at that. But I think when it comes to pulverising teams week in, week out, it just isn't the way that they're set up to play. It's a really, really interesting one, and one that we probably discussed quite a lot and we'll continue to discuss more. Guys, listen, if you're watching right now and there's over 500 people watching live, just ask that when you're on YouTube, you give us a like and you also subscribe. It's absolutely free. We do so many videos now. It's not just this morning briefing that we all know that you come to watch at 9:30. There is many, many more on. As Chris said, Stevie and him have a really excellent sit-down chat that's on this morning, so that's there. And when these extra videos drop, you'll get a notification if you're subscribed, so it allows you to be aware of what's happening. We know that at 9:30 the morning briefing, or VAM on 9:35 will start at that point, but everything else, it drops more randomly, and this is a way for you to get a notification to tell you, look, something dropped down. So definitely do that. It helps you and it helps us. Hit that subscribe button. And if you hit the like button as well, more people will be drawn to the videos, which is what we want. More people watching, the better. Listen, we're going to go to a wee point made by Stevino Cadinho. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because I was watching The Overlap, Chris, which is a really enjoyable watch for anyone who's kind of my era, because Manchester United of that era were obviously an all-conquering side with Alex Ferguson in charge, and you had players like Neville and Keane and Ian Wright who are on the show, and I find it really interesting. They had Davy Moyes on, and he's talking about his theory on signings. And Stevie here is saying we need to move on proper Dowell, Rabi, Hadji, Lawrence and Dessers. And Davy Moyes was basically saying that he knew within a couple of training sessions whether or not somebody was going to make it at the club. And he said his strategy was, you don't go on about they need time, you need to bed them in. He said, I'll go back to the chairman and go after 2 weeks. Listen, I think I've got this wrong. I know we paid $5 million, but in the next transfer window, on day one, we need to get them out. And if it's $3 million, if it's $2 million, that's fine, but it's not going to work here. That sort of ruthlessness we saw under Graham Souness all the time. But we've not seen it too often since. And I look at Robin proper, Chris, and I think there's a guy who's not suited to domestic football in Scotland. Might be a good player. I'm sure he's fine in the Eredivisie. Looks half decent when he plays in the Europa League. Great ping on him. But against the likes of Kyle Vassell, this is not a guy that you're going to want to be manning the barricades.
Mm-hmm.
Would you cut losses like that? Would you be as ruthless as Davy Moyes suggests and just take big calls on players even though they've not had enough time?
Right, that Moyes story, it feeds into one of the ones I think we probably spoke about at the time when Stephen Gerrard came in, and when a new player came into Liverpool, first couple of training sessions, he would fire passes at them with a bit of sling in them. If they controlled it and they were able to take a first touch and then play a pass or get a shot away, you almost earned his instant respect, and he thought you could be a player. If he fired that ball at you and it bounced off you and your second touch was a tackle, he formed an immediate impression of you and thought, "Nah, you're not going to do. You're not going to make it here." And I do think we do give players time to settle. The manager's spoken a lot about this, and new club, new country, new dressing room. There's clearly factors, but I do think sometimes your first judgment can be right. And Stephen, there mentioned a number of the guys like Proper, Dowell, Matondo, Hadji Lawrence, and Dessers. Proper's the only one that's not been here for a long time. Obviously, the rest of them, I think opinions are very much well formed on them now. You're either going to love them or you're going to hate them. Out of that list, I don't think there's a number of them that the fans would say we really, really need to hold on to them. I think people would be happy to see Hadji, for example, stay. The rest of them, not convinced. There's a lot of love there for them. On Proper, I do have domestic concerns over him. Not convinced he's got the physicality or that robust approach that is going to be required in certain domestic games. Other domestic games, certainly Ibrox against perhaps lower level opposition, you would think he might be able to become a bit more accustomed to it and should be able to grow into it and should be able to improve. Some of the other fixtures on the calendar, I'm just not convinced that they're for him. And it sounds as if you make Scottish football out to be a kind of rough and ready backwater when you say you just need a centre half that's big, that's physical, that can dominate in there, that can win his challenges. But you do. That's just the style of the game here. Having centre halves who are cultured and are great on the ball, yes, it might help in certain situations. But you don't really need two of them. I think in John Souttar, Rangers have someone who fits that style. Alongside them, I would just like to see someone who's a bit more rough and ready. I think that's why Balogun has looked as impressive, because he is a bit more physical. He's a bit more robust than Proper is. If Leon Balogun was 5 years younger, it would be great. Unfortunately, it's not, he's not. Sorry, but I think it probably says quite a lot about how Proper has done so far, and the other centre half options there that Balogun signed as a stopgap is now. When people go and pick their team for Dundee United next week, a lot of people would say Balogun starts alongside John Souttar, and that probably says just where Proper is. Whether he's going to pay the price for that in January, I would be surprised. Certainly under this manager, if there's a change of manager at some stage heading into a transfer window, I think Robin Proper's Rangers future is certainly up for debate.
Yeah, it's not that Robin Proper is a bad player. I'm sure that he is a very good player based on what he's achieved in his previous career. But some players just don't suit Scottish football. Mm-hmm. And Chris, I don't think you have to look too far for a player that's not necessarily brilliant on the ball, but defends well. In Cameron Carter-Vickers, most people would say he's the most effective centre-half in Scottish football, unfortunately for Rangers. But that's the case. And that's not a guy who waltzes out from the back and picks a pass out very often. You know, he's a guy that gives the ball cleanly and crisply to someone who's better on it than he is, but defends with his life. And it's the kind of player that Rangers need to put first and foremost in getting someone like that into the team. I'm totally aware that if you've got someone good on the ball from the back and is moving the ball quickly, it makes your attacks more penetrative. But sometimes in life, you've just got to get the basics right. And I don't think Rangers have got the basics right at the moment. John Souttar is a guy who's really, really good on the ball and moves it out well when he's encouraged to do so, and he should be encouraged to do so more. He's got a big mistake in him, but if he didn't have a big mistake in him, he wouldn't be at Rangers. That's the scenario, because a centre half that's capable of doing all those things, defending well, moving out, these are expensive to get. But I think that the scouting in that area, it has to be more focused around muscularity, physicality, refusal to be bullied, grit, determination. These are things that I'm going to be looking for in a Rangers centre-half that I think have been lacking a little bit. You look back to the John Brown era, without sounding like an old git, John Brown wasn't a terrific football player. He was maybe a little bit underrated, to be fair. He could use the ball, but, first and foremost, he put his head where it hurts. And I think Rangers could do with at least one centre-half who does that on a regular basis. And I suppose the other thing is, if Clement was to make a ruthless decision, Chris, as head keeper has said, who's Clement going to go to and say, I've made a mistake, let's move this guy on quickly? Because we've still got this vacuum. Interestingly, had a wee question here, the sniper pointing it to me. Jonny, rumours of the Hibs CEO coming to Ibrox. Well, I'll tell you who'd be happy with that, sniper. Hibs fans, because he's not popular and they're at the bottom of the league, and I don't think that would be well received. He's done a very good job behind the scenes at Hibs with regards to the corporate numbers and renovating the stadium and putting more kind of boxes in and all these type of things, getting the commercial revenue up. But football-wise, it's been an absolute horror show, and appointment of managers has been really poor. So I think that one would be, if that's the case, I think the club would have a huge PR job on their hands with that one. Chris, I don't know what your feelings are.
This, like you mentioned, I think it was on the show late last week. I'm not sure where this rumour has surfaced from or where it's originated from. It's certainly not one that I've heard. And like you, I would be surprised. I know the board are looking at someone who knows the Scottish football landscape, or that's one of the boxes they would like ticked when it comes to James Bisgrove's replacement as chief exec. But I'd be surprised if that's a move they would be going for. I think it was going to be a hard job to sell, bringing someone in from St Mirren. Like you say, given Hibs' position and their recent football fortunes, it would be a very hard sell to try and convince Rangers fans that that's the right way that's the right route to go down.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it'll be interesting to see if that one happens, but it's a difficult story to sell that, even though, as I say, there's no doubt he has done impressive work behind the scenes, but Rangers need to get someone who can fix the football side. I think that's ultimately the only kind of goal, because we don't need to tell anyone watching this, Chris, none of the good work that you do behind the scenes matters in any way if the club isn't firing. So you can have the best youth system in the world, nobody cares if Rangers aren't winning. You can have a fantastic women's setup, nobody cares if Rangers aren't winning. You've got to be realistic about the reality of how big an impact the core football operation has on how everything else is perceived. And that's going to be a really, really challenging one for whoever takes over, because the minute they get in the door, they'll have about 2 days grace, and then the pressure will be on, why aren't you winning? And that's something that CEO can't really influence in the short term. And that's why it's a job that even for 500 grand a year or 900 grand a year or whatever they charge that, I don't think I would thank you for, Chris. I would probably be in a straitjacket by the end of week 2. So listen, it's fascinating as to what's going to happen. I'm amazed it's taken this long, that we're still in a situation where we don't have a chairman. We're still in a situation where we don't have a CEO. Permanent ones, obviously, John Gilligan is doing a great job. I wouldn't go that far, but I would say he's doing a great turn for the board by coming in and taking on the role in the meantime and doing all the recruitment stuff. But it's been a long time since people left their positions, and I don't think we're any further forward in kind of and getting too many of them filled by the looks of things. I might be completely wrong on that, but I suspect it's taking a bit of time. And I understand, Chris, I might be wrong on this, so correct me if I am, but that the chairman is the focus, is the number one focus. The first one to be appointed will be the chairman. That's what I understand.
That's if I'm going through it quite chronologically, it will be chairman before chief exec. Also, the accounts were out a couple of weeks ago. The AGM are counting down days to that. It's in 3 weeks now, 4 weeks. I believe there will be a chairman in before that AGM. I think that's certainly the ambition to have a chairman appointed before the AGM. I say chief exec then comes after that, and it's only once you have the chairman in, once the chief exec in, you can then start saying, well, can we look at a sporting director or a director of football or another football figure within the club. You then look at replacing Craig Robertson. You then look at replacing Zeb Jacobs as head of academy. Once you've got all that sorted, there's then a conversation to be had about the manager and the squad. So there's plenty of work to be done, but it all has to come from the top. It will have to flow down, and it will have to be quite a chronological way of doing things. There's a process, if you like, that will have to be worked through. But the chairman will be the first one, and it's then filling those other vacancies, because there's certainly a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, I think that's right and proper, Chris. There's no point in appointing a youth supremo, to use the tabloid patter, or a director of football operations, when a chairman could come in and appoint a CEO who's got a completely different vision to what Bisgrove and Bennett had. They had this idea of, these pockets of leadership where there was less accountability put on one individual. It might be, and we know Josh has been advocating for this, that a CEO comes in and says, no, I'm wanting a director of football. I want to run like other big football clubs are running, and we want to have this guy in. So I think that's the way to do it, and I would take away any criticism of Rangers not appointing the academy director and not appointing the replacement in terms of the director of football operations, because that to me needs to be the guy making these key appointments and to move the club forward. So I would definitely underline that. So listen, Chris, we've got half an hour done, which is flown by. So thank you for joining me on the Rangers Review Morning Briefing.
No problem
for a wee cameo, and I'll go back to my day off now and enjoy an afternoon of luxurious sitting on the couch doing nothing. We've got plenty more coming as the day commences. As I say, give us a wee plug for your podcast with Stevie.
It was out to members on the YouTube channel yesterday, so you mentioned also subscribing to the channel earlier on. There is an extra level of subscription that you can take up on the channel. If you want to become one of our Rangers Review members, you then get extra videos. You get videos ahead of time. So the talking point with Stevie, we had the idea in the summer, we'll have our own series, we'll do it fortnightly. There'll be lots of exciting and interesting and great positive things to talk about. It's not quite gone to plan, unfortunately, but we have done a number of things. We've done one on James Tavernier's position. We've looked at the boardroom. We've looked at the chief exec. This week we're looking at Dessers, Danilo and Agaman, what they're bringing to the party, and potentially what the future holds for them come January. So that video is now live to public. So again, subscribe to the channel. You'll get the notifications when that lands. So that's there and good to view. And I'm working on a piece on Yanis Hadji for tomorrow morning, so that'll be on the site for tomorrow. I know Josh has got a few things in the pipeline as well, and that's why he's taking a well-earned day off. So Josh is off, you're off, Derek's off. I'm officially the Lone Ranger here at Rangers Review for the day.
Well, who better to hold the fort than Union Jack? Right, that's great. Thanks to everyone who's watched. Thanks for everyone who has sent in comments. Absolutely tons as usual. Really fantastic engagement on the Rangers Review. Every time I'm on, I'm shocked by just how many comments I have to get through, which is quite hard to juggle, actually, especially when your brain is melted like mine. So thanks again, and we will catch you later. Enjoy the rest of your day, and make sure it's a good one.